The summer heat in Gwinnett County hung heavy over the quiet apartment complex, the kind of afternoon where nothing unusual is supposed to happen. Cars sat silently in the parking lot, neighbors moved through their routines, and a young mother named Ashley Boenegra had no idea that within minutes, her life was about to collide with pure rage. What began as jealousy over a secret relationship was already spiraling into something darker, something planned. Hidden behind text messages, whispered anger, and a phone camera ready to record, two women were waiting. By the time Ashley stepped into that parking lot, the trap had already been set, and the violence that followed would soon turn a brutal fight into a homicide investigation. Ashley Boenegra was a 30-year-old mother trying to build a stable life. Friends described her as hardworking, soft-spoken, and dedicated to her young son, who was only 7 years old. She worked as a manager at a floor and decor store in Gwinnett County, Georgia, just outside Atlanta. On the surface, life seemed ordinary, but behind the routine of work and parenting, a complicated relationship was quietly forming, one that would soon spiral into tragedy. At work, Ashley had grown close to one of her employees, Janine Gonzalez. The connection between them slowly turned into a secret affair. For Ashley, it may have felt like a harmless workplace romance, but there was a serious problem that made the situation explosive. Daniel wasn't single. He was in a long-term relationship with a woman named Antonetta Stevens. The two had been together for years and even shared children. To Antonetta, Daniel wasn't just a boyfriend, he was her future. They had moved together from up north, hoping to start a new life in Georgia. But that new life was already cracking. Daniel's younger sister, 17-year-old Janine Gonzalez, happened to be visiting from Buffalo during this time. Janine was extremely close with Antonetta. In fact, she often described Antonetta as more of a sister to her than Daniel was a brother. So when Janine learned that Daniel was secretly seeing his boss at work, the information didn't stay quiet for long. Eventually, Antonetta found out about the relationship between Daniel and Ashley, and when she did, anger took over. The betrayal hit her hard. From her perspective, the man she loved had humiliated her, and the woman involved wasn't just anyone, it was his manager. That humiliation quickly turned into rage. Instead of confronting the situation calmly, Antonetta and Janine began feeding off each other's anger. The conversations between them became less about resolving the situation and more about revenge. And then, a plan started to form. Rather than simply confronting Ashley, they decided to lure her somewhere private, somewhere they could confront her on their own terms. The method they chose was simple, but manipulative. Antonetta secretly took Daniel's phone and began sending messages to Ashley, pretending to be him. The texts sounded emotional and urgent, designed to pull Ashley in. "Where are you? I need to see you. I'm going through a lot. I got kicked out. Please come meet me." Ashley had no reason to suspect anything strange. The messages looked like they were coming directly from Daniel. From her perspective, it probably seemed like he needed support, so she agreed to meet. The location they directed her to was the Mill Creek apartment complex, the very place where Antonetta lived. As Ashley made her way there, Antonetta and Janine were already moving through the complex, waiting for the moment she would appear. Janine followed behind with her phone recording, capturing everything on video. Their voices were tense but excited, like people preparing for confrontation. They watched the walkways and parking lot, scanning for Ashley. At one point, Antonetta even wondered what would happen if Ashley saw them first and tried to leave. Her response was chilling. "She can't get away," she said. "I'll run after her." It was clear by that moment that this wasn't just a heated argument waiting to happen. They were preparing for a physical confrontation. Minutes later, Ashley arrived. She stepped into the parking lot, unaware she had been lured there under false pretenses. What she likely expected was a conversation with Daniel. Instead, she was suddenly confronted by Antonetta. Without warning, the confrontation exploded into violence. Antonetta rushed toward Ashley and began attacking her. The punches came fast and aggressive, quickly overwhelming the smaller woman. Ashley tried to defend herself, grabbing at Antonetta's hair and pleading for the attack to stop. But the violence didn't slow down. Standing nearby, Janine continued filming the entire scene. Instead of trying to break up the fight, she encouraged it, shouting comments and watching as the assault grew more brutal. Ashley struggled to protect herself as blow after blow landed. At one point, she begged for Antonetta to let go of her hair, her voice strained and desperate. The beating continued. Antonetta's anger seemed completely unchecked. She screamed threats while striking Ashley repeatedly. "I will murder you," she shouted during the attack. The words sounded like rage in the moment, but they would soon take on a horrifying meaning. Eventually, the physical assault slowed. But the humiliation and taunting didn't stop. Ashley was battered and injured, trying to gather herself while the two women continued to intimidate her. Even after the main attack ended, the confrontation dragged on. There were threats, mocking comments, and arguments about her phone. For anyone watching, it was clear the situation had already crossed a dangerous line, and all of it had been captured on video. What Antonetta and Janine didn't realize in that moment was that the damage had already been done. The injuries Ashley suffered during those brutal minutes in the parking lot were far more serious than anyone present seemed to understand. Soon, someone nearby would call 911, and the fight that began as an act of jealousy would quickly become something far more serious, a case that investigators would soon be calling a homicide. Someone in the apartment complex had seen enough. The screams, the chaos in the parking lot, the violent struggle. It was impossible to ignore. A call to 911 was placed, and soon emergency responders arrived at the scene. Ashley Boenegra was found badly injured. She was rushed to the hospital with severe trauma from the beating she had just endured. What happened in that parking lot had only lasted minutes, but the damage was devastating. Doctors worked to stabilize her, but the injuries were simply too severe. Later that day, Ashley Boenegra died. What had started as a jealous confrontation was now a homicide investigation. Meanwhile, back at the apartment complex, Antonetta Stevens was already preparing her version of events. When officers first arrived to ask questions, she appeared calm and cooperative. But the story she told was very different from what had actually happened. According to Antonetta, Ashley had shown up at her apartment looking for Daniel and started the confrontation herself. She claimed the fight was mutual and insisted she had simply defended herself. To the officers at the door, it sounded like a typical domestic dispute that had gotten out of control. At that moment, they had no reason to know that the entire incident had been planned and recorded. Antonetta even tried to portray herself as heartbroken rather than violent. She talked about how devastated she was over Daniel cheating on her. She described feeling betrayed and emotionally overwhelmed. To anyone listening, it sounded like a woman dealing with heartbreak, but the truth was already sitting inside Janine's phone. Hours later, detectives returned to the apartment with devastating news. They informed Antonetta that Ashley had died from her injuries. The reaction was immediate shock. Antonetta appeared stunned. She insisted that killing anyone had never been her intention. She told detectives she had been dealing with mental stress and emotional pain, but intentions didn't change the reality. A woman was dead, and the investigation was only beginning. Detectives then began speaking with Daniel Gonzalez. At first, he didn't even know Ashley had died. When officers showed him the messages sent from his phone earlier that day, confusion quickly turned into dread. He explained that he had been asleep when the messages were sent. According to him, Antonetta had taken his phone and pretended to be him in order to lure Ashley to the apartment complex. The realization hit him hard. When detectives finally told him Ashley had died, Daniel broke down in disbelief. He struggled to process what had just happened. What he thought was a confrontation had ended with someone losing their life, but perhaps the most shocking interview came from Janine Gonzalez. When detectives sat down with the 17-year-old, she initially spoke casually about the events of the day. She admitted that she had been there during the fight. She even admitted she had joined in briefly. What stood out to investigators wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. At times, Janine giggled while describing the beating. She talked about the fight almost like it was another dramatic story, rather than a violent assault that had just killed someone. Eventually, detectives confronted her with the truth. Ashley Boenegra had died from the injuries she suffered during the attack. For a moment, the reality seemed to settle in. Janine admitted the situation was crazy. She even said it made her feel like she might be going to hell. But by that point, the damage had already been done. Both women were arrested. Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez were charged with aggravated battery, robbery, and felony murder. The robbery charge came from taking Ashley's phone during the assault. The evidence against them was overwhelming. There were witness reports, the text messages used to lure Ashley, and perhaps most damning of all, the video recording of the attack itself. What they had filmed as a moment of revenge had become the key piece of evidence in a murder case. In court, the charges were eventually reduced, and both women were convicted of robbery and voluntary manslaughter. Each received a 20-year prison sentence. Today, Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez are serving those sentences at Pulaski State Prison in Georgia. According to their current release schedule, they are expected to remain behind bars until 2042. But none of that changes the reality for Ashley Boenegra's family. A 7-year-old boy lost his mother because a moment of jealousy, what began with lies, anger, and manipulation, ended with a life taken far too soon. One decision, one planned confrontation, and a young mother never made it home. If this story shocked you, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel for more real crime cases that reveal how quickly ordinary situations can turn into tragedy. And I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think jealousy alone caused this crime? Or was the attack something they had already decided would turn violent? Let me know what you think in the comments below.